On this crossover edition of Locked On Seminoles and Locked On Canes, who are the key players and the key matchups that will determine the winner?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles and a crossover with Locked On Canes. I am Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for joining in to check out all the new stuff going on with Miami's injury report, Florida State's injury report, key matchups, and who we think is going to actually win this game. We're going to be joined by Alex Donno here in just a moment. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. We sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, Mr. Alex Donno, how are we doing today, sir?
Brian, I am doing well. You know, for me, it's been a while since I've watched Miami play. Miami coming off the bye week, so I am looking forward to my favorite rivalry in sports. I mean, I grew up on Miami versus Florida State. You know, as a child of the 80s, you know, I grew up for a long stretch of my childhood into early adulthood. Every single year, it seemed like this game came down to a field goal, and it came down to number one versus number two, or number one versus number three, and a national championship eliminator almost every single time these teams played. And I'm glad that both teams are good. I mean, regardless of what happened in Charlottesville last weekend, Florida State still very dangerous and has an opportunity to kind of erase that loss from memory if they can pull it off against Miami.
I would absolutely agree. I'm older than you, but like I remember like mid 80s when I was a little kid and just first watching them, those games, that's when it really started. And just the draft picks, Dion and, you know, all these different guys, and Toretta came along and stuff like that. It was just great. Every year, one of them, somebody picked them to win it. Like they were preseason. One of them was number one preseason pretty much every year. So, yeah, this rivalry is a lot of fun. And it's why I really got into the recruiting side of things, because the way they recruited and changed the entire college football landscape. So with that, speaking of elite talent, I'm going to throw this to you. Besides the obvious, like Ruben Bain is incredible, et cetera, which key players from Miami do you think need to really step up to beat the Florida State Seminoles?
Well, I mean, I think about the importance on defense of gap integrity, trying to, you know, contain Thomas Castellanos. And I think that the coordinator chess match between Miami's Corey Heatherman on defense and Gus Malzahn leading Florida State's offense is going to be huge. But for Miami's defensive tackles, I think this is really, really important for them to play disciplined. The guy who's graded out the best so far has been Ahmad Moten, who's been a starter all season long. Transfer David Blay has done a good job as well. And Justin Scott, former five-star recruit who's in his second year, who's the third defensive tackle, has stepped up and made some plays this year. So, you know, of course, you mentioned Ruben Bain on the other edge. Akeem Mesidor is going to have a big opportunity. And both Bain and Mesidor this year not only have been really effective as pass rushers, but they've both graded really well against the run also, which I think is going to be important against the number one rushing offense in college football. So just the importance of communication and assignment football on defense is going to be big on that side of the ball. You know, on offense, I think it's no secret, and Florida State may try to take this away from Miami and force Carson Beck to beat them downfield, but really Miami, their bread and butter has been setting the tone with the running game. Mark Fletcher and Marty Brown, Miami's top two running backs, have both played really well behind an offensive line that's one of the best in the country. So, you know, Cristobal is going to try to establish the run. I think that's no secret. You know, an X factor will be, and we'll probably get into some injury stuff in a little bit, but the possible return of Jordan Lyle, who actually began the season as Miami's starting tailback, but hasn't played since that Notre Dame game due to injury, that could add, you know, another element. And he's more of a home run hitter, got more speed than the other two Miami running backs do. So that could be something else to watch out for. And I think in this one, when you think about the passing game, you know, Malachi Toney, true freshman, playing his first road game. So that's going to be something to monitor how he does. But Toney has had an excellent start to the year. And then you've got the experienced super senior, 6-year senior CJ Daniels, who's been a reliable target for Carson Beck so far. Because, Brian, I would imagine, Florida State's probably going to play with a lot of heavy boxes, and Miami's going to need to complete passes to win this game. So watch out for some of these receivers.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And since you just brought up some of the receivers, Florida State safeties tackled like crap against Virginia. It's weird because they were so good in their first few games. Nobody really knows why, but I'd imagine they'd be a little more focused. Tackling Malachi from somebody who's watched him play several times is not a fun time. That is difficult. You got to size that up. You got to make sure you get the right angles and all that stuff. He's a key player in this game, and hats off to Malachi for coming in a year early, by the way, for those who don't know. He enrolled a year early at University of Miami.
Yeah.
He's been really, really good. It's very rare to see that. So good for him. I think Florida State, just like you said, they're going to play up and challenge them to throw over the top in 50-50 balls. Florida State's got good DBs, but Miami's got good receivers. I have no idea how that's going to go. It's the reason it's called 50-50, but there are very few quarterbacks that have more accuracy than Carson Beck. So FSU's DBs are going to go up against it. So that brings up my number one. Some way, somehow, they've got to get pressure with 4 a lot more than they have this year. And if they don't, Miami will win. End of story, period. Florida State's pass rush is beyond anemic with 4. Just completely terrible. I forget the number, but they're in the bottom 5 or 6 in the country, G6 included, with like pressuring with their base on amount of time for the opposing quarterback to get the ball off. That's not going to get it done against a solid team along the Canes. So no offense to Virginia. They've got a good run game. I'll take Miami with Maui Noah and all those guys. So Florida State has to get home with that. Second question for you, which player or group are you most concerned about for the Canes possibly being exposed, even if it's just in a big moment, or overall going into this game?
It's hard. Like, Miami's obviously played really well to start the year. So I have questions. Like, it's hard to say like, hey, this group has been bad. Like you can't really say that. I don't think to this point, Miami's defensive secondary, which looks a lot better. I don't think they've really been tested that much for me to say, hey, that group is, completely turned around from what they were last year. So I would say, for Miami's corners, which are, big and physical when you have guys like Xavier Lucas and OJ Frederic, but Deuce Robinson, that's a test. 6'6", leading Florida State in receiving. I mean, he was everything in that Virginia game. Certainly wasn't the offense's fault or his fault, despite that, controversial non-catch near the end. He played a huge role in Florida State's offense, and that's someone Miami's going to have to be wary of. On the offensive side, how's Carson Beck going to bounce back? Florida was not his best game. The Florida defense, I think, did some good things to kind of take some downfield stuff away, but Beck's timing was also off in that game. So first 3 games of the year, Carson, looked like a genuine Heisman contender. Didn't look that way against the Gators. So I think how he bounces back is going to be important against the Seminoles. And an overall, concern or question that I have, Brian, couple of them. I already mentioned first road game of the year for Miami. So being able to handle that environment is something I think Carson Beck, who's played in, big road environments during his time in the SEC, is going to have to kind of set the tone for his teammates, and his leadership is going to be important. Miami has at no point this season been trailing in a football game. So if that happens this weekend, and I would say Florida State is a team that's very much built to play with a lead, especially for their defense. So, if Miami, we haven't seen them play from behind this year. I think Florida State's a lot better, defensively when they're playing with the lead. So that's a question that, may or may not be answered this Saturday. So that's something I'm looking at.
I brought that up on my show the last couple of days, and congrats to you for bringing that. I wasn't sure if Miami trailed yet or not. They've been in some tight situations, but I mean, even the game against Florida was tight until like the last 4 to 6 minutes. They just killed them. But I'm curious to see what Miami can do. At some point, it's going to happen. It may not be the FSU game. You get down. Carson's been down before in bad situations. They were down 28-0 last year at Alabama, and he went back.
Right.
They didn't end up winning, but it wasn't his fault. Like, they took the lead after being down by 28. He is capable. And that Georgia receiving group dropped more passes than any team in the country last, literally. So Miami's receiver group's a little more dependable, especially C.J. Daniels. He's got great hands. I'm curious to see if they're down, if they open it up. This is my question about Miami. Mario is very conservative. will they allow Carson to just, you know what, we can win some of these one-on-ones, take some more shots? I think he can absolutely do it. I think he's an NFL quarterback, but does Mario really let him? I have no idea the answer to that, but if you got the lead, we'll never find out. So on the other side of that, I mean, if Florida State gets behind, you brought that up, their offense is predicated with the lead. They do play up-tempo. I think it would be a little easier for Florida State, but they would still rather run the ball. Both these teams are run first, play with the lead, and take play-action shot teams. Different styles of offense, but play-action is their bread and butter for both of them, and they do a very good job of it. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the concerns and some of the other key matchups here on this crossover edition of Locked On Canes and Locked On Seminoles. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, and the NFL season is here. FanDuel has an offer for you that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you can get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel app. If you want to bet on over-unders in the NFL, if you want to bet on player props, who's going to win MVP, going to make the NFL championships, it doesn't matter. FanDuel's got something for you. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and to get started. We are also brought to you by our friends over at Square. Square is the opportunity for you to support your local neighborhood. Oftentimes when you tap your credit card or debit card, it's a Square that is being the one that takes in the payment at a lot of these local places. It could be a laundromat. It could be something near Coral Gables. It could be something in Tallahassee. They're everywhere. You just don't realize it. And they look to do business with the small businesses around you. So whether that business is something right down the street from you or a few blocks away, pizza chain, go check them out because it's really important. So with Square, there's one other thing here. Make sure you go check out and learn all that you can. Go to square.com/go/Locked On College to learn more. Before you do, go support your local neighborhoods. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. Thank you once again for making this crossover with Locked On Canes and Locked On Seminoles a part of your day. I'm Brian Smith with Alex Donno, talking one of the best rivalries, in my opinion, and I'll speak for Alex here, in all of American sports. Miami FSU. It's great. It's one of the reasons I enjoy college football so much. And you brought up something at the very beginning. Alex, when was the last time, I'll test your knowledge, you're better at this than I am, that both teams were ranked even top 15, top 20 at any point early in the season before they played? Like Florida State, I think they felt like 18. They really took a hit, but they're still top 20. When was the last time that they were both like legitimately, this team has a chance to win the ACC? That's
man. I want to say, and I'm not as good with this stuff as you might think, but I feel like there was a game that was like Al Golden years. So obviously Miami didn't finish the season strong, but it was like early enough in the year. Duke Johnson was playing well. I think Miami was unbeaten and Florida State was good. It might have been like, I don't know, 2012, 2013. It was a game. I remember the game because I think Duke Johnson, that was when he got injured and broke his leg, and Florida State beat Miami. But I think I want to say both teams were good at that point, but it wasn't like, it wasn't like it used to be. Like, it wasn't like what we used to have. I mean, I remember, the game in 2000 where, Miami beat Florida State in the Orange Bowl, and somehow Miami didn't get into the national championship game that year. Florida State did, but Miami won that. That was wide right 3 in 2000. Like that to me was like the epitome, when Miami and Florida State were both top 2, top 3 in the country. So we haven't had nearly enough of those in this century.
2017 might have been kind of close to that. I mean, that was towards the end of Florida State, and they started to tail, and then Miami at the end of that season, they both just they fell, and then it's never been the same until this year. So here's to hoping for more good matchups. Let's talk about matchups in general here. The other matchup that I'm really curious with, offensive tackle for Miami. I'm really high on Markel Bell. I don't think he gets enough credit. Florida State's going to have to contend with him. We all know about Maui Noah, and if you don't, and you're either a Miami or Florida State fan, where have you been? He's going to leave after this year, be a first-round pick. That's pretty straightforward. Give your pitch right here, Alex, for Markel Bell on why he should be at least considered for all ACC at minimum.
He is the most improved player on Miami's team over the past year. That's something I see with my eyes, and Mario Cristobal told me that before the season started. So Markel Bell just 2 years ago was in JUCO before he transferred to Miami. So his actual techniques have caught up with his physical abilities, because the other part of it physically, for those who are not aware, Markel Bell is 6'9", 345 pounds. Now, for someone that tall, he's actually taller than Bryant McKinney was when he was at Miami. For someone that tall, obviously your footwork has to be really good to deal with people of lower centers of gravity. So his technique has taken a huge leap this year for Markel Bell, and he's been really, really effective. I mean, like you said, he gets overshadowed a little bit because the tackle on the other side, CC Mauinoa, is consensus first-round draft pick projection. But Markel Bell, I don't know if he's going to be a first-round pick, but he's definitely playing his way, into the higher ends of the NFL draft. I think he has come a long way. And when Ruben Hurricane Bain has repeatedly said that it's very difficult to get around Markel Bell in practice, when Ruben says that, I listen. Bell has come a really long way on Miami's offensive line. And just to stay with the O-line for a second, I think the guy who doesn't get talked about nearly enough is right guard Inez Cooper. He's a mauler on the field. He's an excellent run blocker. And Inez Cooper, you don't always get this from offensive linemen. He's the biggest trash talker on the team. So he's the guy who's going to, try to rattle the opponents a little bit. He's done that pretty effectively so far this year. He got into it with Cormani McClain, a couple weeks ago when Miami played Florida. A lot of the stuff went viral. So Inez Cooper is someone who is not only a guy who's going to rattle you on the field, he's going to rattle you off the field a little bit as well.
That's kind of typical. There's always one guy on our team, but you don't expect it to be your right guard.
Yeah,
that is so random. That is so random.
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. So everybody knows Cam Ward talks a lot, right? But when Ward was on Miami last year, Cam would say, "I'm not as big of a talker as that dude is," talking about Inez Cooper. Like that was the guy who was who is really the one. It's all when it comes to his teammates, it's all friendly stuff, brotherhood type of stuff. But yeah, and Inez Cooper is a guy who's going to try to get under your skin.
Well, Florida State's got to contend with him too, and I'm glad you brought it up. A great matchup. How does Miami handle Darrell Jackson? Somebody used to play at Miami, albeit briefly. That's 330 plus pounds of athlete. He's a very rare guy. Are they going to double him or single him? That'll be a key component because Miami's primary play to run the ball is called duo. You block two guys inside with double teams, and then they move off to the second. It's not complex. It's been around forever. But Miami might be the best team in the country at doing it. How they handle Big Darrell will dictate a lot because he changes games. If you don't double him, it's hard. Not many guys can block him one-on-one. Cooper might be one of them that could. There aren't very many that I would trust with that. I'll be curious to see what they do with Darrell. I think they're going to move him around. Maybe I'm wrong. They've got a lot of size. That's not Florida State's problem. It's getting the speed rush. They just don't have any, and they've got to figure some of that out. The other matchup that I'm curious about, Florida State, you mentioned the secondary for the Canes. I mean, Lord only knows Florida didn't challenge it. My God, I don't know what that was. They are horrific. I'm curious to see how many shots they take. Mekhi Danzy might be the fastest player in college football. He's got, as of earlier this year, the 9th fastest 400-meter time in the world, literally. So that's somebody they're going to send to Deuce is 6'6". You can throw 50-50 balls. We just don't know. Yeah. We just don't know. And if Florida State can't hit those, I don't think they got to hit a couple of those in some capacity, even if they're just jump balls, or I think Miami's going to win. They're not going to just grind out 5 yards at a time all the time against that group of defensive tackles. I know you and I had some questions about Miami's tackles coming to the year. I think they played very, very well. Florida State's O-line's good, but I think Miami has more raw talent. They're going to have to throw the ball down the field. So that's a great matchup. But any other spot that you're really curious about with the matchup either way?
Yeah, I mean, I'll reiterate this one quickly. We already spent some time on it, but Miami's defensive front versus Tommy Castellanos. I think 100%. Try to keep him in the pocket, try to keep him contained. I think for Miami, being good on first and second down is going to be key because I noticed Florida State is 6th nationally in converting third downs. And that doesn't happen if you're not good on first and second down. So trying to keep Florida State behind the sticks and force third downs and long is going to be key, because I'm sure FSU is going to try to, you can't necessarily block Reuben Bain, but you can try to scheme against him, get rid of footballs quickly, bring up third and shorts, try to negate Bain as much as possible. So that's something I'm going to be looking for. How Miami chooses to approach Deuce Robinson. I think press coverage. I think be as physical with him as possible. Try to bump him in those first 6 yards. Just try to take him off his routes as much as possible, because Deuce Robinson is someone who can absolutely kill you. And I think you talked about Florida State's safeties and how the tackling needs to be better compared to what it was last year. I think Miami's receivers against Florida State's DBs overall, because again, I think Miami's going to have to hit passing plays to win this game, because I think Florida State, in my humble opinion, would probably rather dare Carson Beck to beat them downfield than let Mark Fletcher and possibly Jordan Lyle and Marty Brown beat them in the running game. So I think you're going to see some heavy boxes. I think Miami's going to have some opportunities with one-on-one matchups with their receivers. So I'm curious to see how that goes. And I'm also, very curious to see what the approach is going to be. And I'm getting questions about this from Locked On Canes listeners. If Miami does have the lead late in the game, do they get super conservative? I know people were worried about that in the Notre Dame game. I think it depends on the situation. And if you do get conservative at the end of the game, if you have the luxury of leading, I'm not saying that's going to be the case or not. I think maybe trying to keep Florida State's offense off the field as much as possible, which how you do that is run the ball and try to take time off the clock. I think that could come into play late. Can Miami control the pace of play, and can Miami win the time of possession? I think is going to be key, because you want to limit the possessions of Castellanos and company as much as you can.
100%. That's exactly what I was going to say in reverse. Florida State's chances of winning, there are different ways you can do it, but the easiest path to victory is a fast start. At least make them uncomfortable. For the record, I will be shocked if Carson Beck doesn't play well. He's a graduate student, and he's seen everything in the SEC. I'm not worried about him one way or the other. They have to rattle some of the other guys. You mentioned Malachi Toney. Guys like that make Elijah Lofton beat you, not Mark Fletcher. Something, if you can do that and they still win, you tip your cap. Don't allow their primary guys to beat you. And, Carson Beck's kind of the exception. He's the quarterback. He's got the ball in his hands on every play. Make somebody else be the winner for Miami and play from elite. If they have to throw the ball to beat you and they do, so be it. But if Florida State starts like they did against Virginia, they don't deserve to win. They could not have been less focused, I think is probably the nice way to put it. And that's not how you win games. So we come back, we're going to talk about just that, the ability to come up with a prediction here on this Locked On Crossover. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Mazda. They craft cars for those who do more than simply move. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can also make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. At Game Time, college football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, and all the energy in the stands. There's nothing quite like it, but let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless prices and fees that you didn't expect from the front that show up on the back end. That's not much fun. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives me the advantage, and it gives you the advantage. Well, back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices. No hidden fees. What you see is what you pay. I just looked up the price for a basketball game that I'm going to. In less than 2 minutes, I knew which seat I was going to get. I knew the price, and I had everything set up. Less than 2 minutes. Game Time is a really easy app to use. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, download the Game Time app today. All right, this is the last segment here, and this is the one that it's just the money shot here. Who do you think is going to win and why? What would have to happen for Miami to lose? What would they have to do to win? Take it away.
Okay, I think for Miami to lose this game, there need to be, in my opinion, self-inflicted wounds, because I think the advantage at both lines of scrimmage, I expect Miami to have those. I think that, to me, if Miami plays their game, Miami should be able to win. But there's always the possibility, and Florida State can create some chaos. If Miami, they haven't lost a fumble yet this year, so maybe they're due, or maybe they're just really good at ball security. So avoid the fumbling. Obviously, Beck has had 3 interceptions in his last 2 games, so keep the interceptions to a minimum. And I think if Miami avoids the mistakes, they'll be able to win. If Miami makes the mistakes, which can either Florida State creates those, or maybe the hostile road environment comes into play, then I think the game could get really, really dicey for Miami. I think the path to victory involves scoring first would be big. Whoever gets the ball first might dictate that. But, Miami playing from leads has been super effective this year. We haven't seen them play from behind. And if you start playing from a lead, you can maybe quiet that crowd down a little bit. So I think that's a big part of it. I think if Miami is able to execute, and if they're able to, win the trench battles consistently, I'm going to go, and I apologize to my Locked On Canes listeners that I'm evolving my prediction a little bit throughout the week, but I'm going to say 31-23. Miami is what I'm looking at now, which obviously would involve controlling the time of possession if you're going to hold Florida State to just 23 points. But I'm going to go with something like that. I think it's going to be a physical game. I don't think it's going to be decided until the fourth quarter, when Miami will do what they usually do, and that's wear opponents down with their running game. So I think the fourth quarter is going to be the difference. I'm going to go Miami by 8 points, 31-23.
That doesn't sound too far off for what I'm going to say. Florida State, I think their key, number one, don't play with the lack of energy that you did against Virginia. And if you do that against Miami, we need to have a whole nother conversation. That would be pretty disappointing, to put it mildly. I expect both teams to play pretty well first half. The key will be the goofy play. A block field goal, a dropped touchdown, somebody on a busted coverage. Don't screw it up, do your job kind of thing. That's how you can lose games against anybody, but especially against an arch rival. So with that, the other thing that I'm going to say, somebody brought up earlier in the game, Florida State's going to be able to run the ball at least somewhat. They're just really good at it. They have to hit some shots in some way, shape, or form. If they do not, they're not winning. And to do that, it's something that Alex talked about, and absolutely rightly so. I give the edge. I think Florida State's O-line's pretty good, but I'll still give the edge to Miami's D-line. How do they pass protect in obvious passing downs? 3rd and 8. Sometimes Tommy will just take off and make 3 guys miss. He's a freak, but that's not the desired way to go about it. You need to be able to throw on time and on rhythm against NFL players. If Florida State can't do that, they will go home with an L. That simple. I trust Deuce Robinson. No offense to Miami secondary. He's going to make some plays. Can he make enough for them to win, though? That's going to probably depend on those offensive tackles and offensive linemen. If that doesn't go well, Miami will win. So right now, I think Miami, I have the exact same score in terms of their point. I got 31-28. It's kind of what I'm playing with. But I want to see more information, probably more background info on injuries before I give any kind of score, because I trust neither coaching staff whatsoever. I have to do my own research. I never believe injury reports that are publicized. They're always garbage. So that's just the way it is. Alex and I joke about it all the time off air too. So with that, Alex, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. And to all the Locked On Seminoles listeners, Locked On Canes listeners, you guys can find me at Locked On Canes, available free on YouTube, available free wherever you get your podcasts. I also host Locked On ACC along with Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. Brian Smith, of course, is a frequent guest with us on Locked On ACC as well. We love the work that he does. So make sure you check me out, Locked On ACC and Locked On Canes.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Actually looking forward to joining you on Locked On ACC. I have a little something for you here in the next few days, but I'll explain that after the show is over. But it's not necessarily good for Miami or Florida State, but I'll get into that in a minute. You can find Locked On Seminoles wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We will see you again soon. Take care.